I'm gonna be honest. My flight to Fort Lauderdale, so not a new airport, was one of my worst flight experiences of my entire life. Here's why. So, the person taking us to the airport picks us up at 10 a.m. and we get to the airport with no traffic. It's 10:30 a.m. Everything was going really smoothly at first because we got past security by 11 a.m. because we got priority. So that's really good at JFK. We got lunch out by 11:30, and at 12 o'clock we were in the gate. Then they switched our gate. We got there at 12:10. We were supposed to be boarding between 12:15 and 12:45 for a 1 o'clock flight. Unfortunately, our flight got delayed until 1:40, and we boarded just after 1. Here's the only problem with that, though. Nobody wanted to actually load our bags because, back in New York, it was like 15 degrees and the wind chills were like close to 0. So nobody wants to be outside doing all that. It took a disgustingly long 50 minutes for them to actually load our bags because there was also some kind of weird error going on, and our flight didn't actually begin to taxi and take off until around 2:45 p.m. Because of this thing that's called the holiday routes, our air time had to be extended to 3 hours and 1 minute exactly. We landed at 5:44, so it was a little bit, a little bit earlier than expected, but not by that much. But really, we should have been out that plane at 4:15, and instead, we didn't leave the plane until around 5:50, if I remember correctly. So it's just before 6 and we're in the airport. We need to get dinner immediately. So we get dinner at 6:10. We leave at 6:40. The plan was for us to be in Boca Raton before we had dinner, and then we'll just have dinner a little bit later. But because of our plans being completely marred, we had to have dinner at the airport. We couldn't even do it on the way, which is what our plan was going to be when it looked like we were going to be landing at 5. But that's not what happened. Then, at 7 o'clock, we got our bags. So we didn't actually leave the airport until 7 o'clock. We had to wait 15 minutes for a shuttle to come, which didn't come until 7:15. And then it didn't actually get to where we need to pee until 7:25. And then we couldn't find a place until 7:30. Starting to see how late this is. The line to actually get the rental car took until 8 o'clock. Then it took until 8:15 for us to actually find the paperwork needed for the car. We left at 8:20 p.m. So it wasn't until 8:20 that we were even on the way up to the hotel. From the airport to the hotel, it's 30 minutes. So we should have been at the hotel at 8:50. The problem was that we couldn't find a parking lot for 10 minutes that we need to park at. So we didn't actually manage to park until 9 o'clock. So that's why it was one of the worst experiences of my life, because we spent so much time, extra time, that we pretty much got to the hotel right before we needed to go to sleep. We were supposed to have time in the afternoon, and we didn't, because in an ideal world, we would have got off the plane just after 4. We would have gotten our bags. We probably would have left the airport around 5, gotten a 5:15 shuttle probably. Actually, we probably would have left a little bit before 5. Probably would have left around 4:45, taken a 5 shuttle, gotten there at 5:15. I don't think it would have been quite as crowded. I think that we would have actually managed to have gotten the rental car by 6, and then we should have been able to just leave at 6 and get to the hotel at 6:30. We really had a 2.5 hour delay throughout this whole thing, because after you had an hour and 45 minute delay for flying or something like that, the last thing that you want is to then not be able to leave the airport for 2.5 hours after that. A lot of times it gets relatively close to that, but you want to try to limit it as possible. You really want it to only be an hour and a half if you have to rent a car, which in most cases you do. If you're on a teen tour, then that's different. It all depends on the airport. Fort Lauderdale is a small city, but it surprisingly has a lot of air traffic, which I was not actually expecting. I was expecting it to be relatively small amount of air traffic, and it wasn't. So that was partially my bad, but still, this was unacceptable. Obviously, a lot of delays could be attributed to the storm that plowed through yesterday. That was New York City's largest single-day temperature drop on record, or at least we think it is. The high temperature was shortly before sunrise at 58 degrees, and temperatures plunged fast down to 8 degrees. The temperature drop from 48 degrees at noon to 18 degrees at 6 p.m. was the second largest 6-hour temperature drop on record. I was actually outside when it hit freezing. Wind chills by that point were already at 20 degrees, so you can imagine how brutal the wind was. There was a bit of a snow mix. It wasn't that bad. It was only like about 20 minutes of light snow, no accumulation. We did see nearly 2 inches of rain. There's a lot of flooding problems, and the worst part was that around 3 o'clock, everything froze. Everything froze around 3 o'clock, so which is going to lead to ice. It's not so bad when it's still 31 degrees, but everyone was like, this is the big freeze. It's not going to get above freezing until Tuesday. And surely enough, once you got to dinner time and after, the freezing conditions got even worse. To the point where we got very close to a record low. It was 7 degrees this morning. The record was 6. I'm sure some parts of the metro did set a record, especially with their sites not being as large. But honestly, once we get some official verification, we just got a big record in for our largest temperature fall in a single day. Because even a 6-hour drop, it was there wasn't that much to do, before and after. Whereas in this case, there really was. I think that in that case, the 6-hour temperature drop was across 2 days because of the timing of it. And in this case, if you want to have such a large temperature fall, it's going to be a big storm on the backside of it. And this was not just a New York problem. This is a nationwide issue. Really one of the worst winter storms that we've seen here in a while. And that had a big effect on our flight. But it wasn't the end-all be-all because it only accounted for around 30 to 40% of our delays. The other 60 to 70% of our delays were for other reasons that just make traveling annoying. I'm gonna be honest. This was even more torturous than our Seattle trip, and that's saying something because it's 6 hours to fly to Seattle. But that's just how it was. It was 6 hours to fly to Seattle, and yet the day of travel still was not as long as this, even when you factor in 3 hours behind. Or maybe it was, but not by that much. Seattle, we left at 8 o'clock, and we were already at our hotel at 5, which was 8 o'clock Eastern. So that's 12 hours of travel. This was 11. But the flight's 3 hours shorter on this one. So we really did have this 2-hour delay, and that's what made it so miserable.